What happens when the person you sacrificed everything for tells you that you don't belong at the most important moment of their life? When your own child looks you in the eye and says you're not good enough to witness their happiness. The evening air felt heavy as I stood outside that pristine wedding venue, my best dress carefully chosen for a celebration I'd never see. I'd arrived with hope in my heart, only to hear those crushing words from the staff: "Your name isn't on the list." The confusion in their eyes mirrored the devastation blooming in my chest. "My name is Margaret. I'm 71 years old." And that day, standing at the entrance of my son's wedding, uninvited and unwanted, I realized I had spent 3 decades raising someone who saw me as nothing more than a convenience. I found Derek crying in an orphanage when he was just 3 years old. A tiny, abandoned boy who needed someone to love him. I became that someone. I gave him my last name, my home, every ounce of energy I had. I worked double shifts, sometimes triple, to afford the best private schools. I sacrificed relationships, dreams, my entire existence so this child could have everything I never did. When he graduated with his engineering degree, tears streamed down my face. I thought every sleepless night, every missed opportunity, every dollar stretched impossibly thin had been worth it. I was wrong. I searched for Derek among the elegantly dressed guests, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. When I finally found him, looking handsome in his tuxedo, I asked him about the mistake with the guest list. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look apologetic. He rolled his eyes like I was an annoying stranger and said with pure contempt, "Did you really think you would be invited?" Those words sliced through me like a blade, but I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I smiled calmly, told him I understood perfectly, and walked away with my head held high. What Derek didn't know was that in the middle of his ceremony, his phone would start ringing nonstop, and his perfect new life would begin to crumble. Vanessa, his fiancée, had orchestrated this whole thing. From the moment she entered our lives 2 years ago, she'd been poisoning his mind against me. "Your mother is too clingy," she'd tell him whenever I called. "A woman her age should have her own life instead of always hovering over us." And Derek, like a puppet on strings, would nod and agree with everything she said. The visits became less frequent. The phone calls grew colder. The excuses became more elaborate and transparent. The first time Vanessa disrespected me to my face, I waited for Derek to defend me. We were having dinner at my house when she wrinkled her nose at the food I'd spent hours preparing and announced that she didn't understand how Derek could have grown up eating such garbage. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, waiting for my son to say something. Anything. But he just kept eating like nothing had happened, like his mother's feelings were irrelevant. Then came the more calculated humiliations. "Margaret, don't you think that blouse is a bit too young for you?" Vanessa would say with a smile that never reached her eyes. Or when I'd stop by their apartment without calling first, "Oh, Margaret, I wish you had let us know you were coming. We're busy planning our future." And Derek always nodded. Always took her side. Always made me feel like an intruder in my own son's life. But what shattered me completely was their engagement announcement. They organized a family dinner, and I was the last person to find out. I arrived at Derek's place expecting a normal evening, and walked into a room full of Vanessa's relatives, all celebrating around her enormous diamond ring. "Surprise," they all shouted. I forced my face into a smile and congratulated them while something fundamental broke inside my chest. "Mom," Derek said later that night, his tone strangely formal and distant. "Vanessa and I have been talking about the wedding. We want something intimate." "Just close family?" I nodded, assuming I was included in that category. God, I was so naive. The following weeks were torture. Vanessa controlled every aspect of the planning, and whenever I asked about the ceremony, she gave me vague non-answers. "We're still deciding," she'd say dismissively. "We'll let you know." But they never did. 3 days before the wedding, I called Derek to ask what time I should arrive at the venue. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Mom," he finally said, "Vanessa and I have decided the wedding will be for only the closest family." The words hit me like a physical blow. "But Derek, I am your mother." "I know," he replied, his voice flat. "But Vanessa feels that, well, you don't fit the image we want to project." I didn't fit their image. The woman who had worked herself to exhaustion for him. The woman who had given up love, companionship, and her own dreams. That woman didn't fit their perfect Instagram, worthy wedding aesthetic. But I decided to go anyway. I put on my best dress, the one I'd bought specifically for this occasion. I had my hair done. I took a taxi to the venue, clinging to the desperate hope that when Derek saw me there, something in him would remember the nights I sat by his bedside when he was sick, Remember the sacrifices I made. Remember that I was his mother. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I gave my name at the reception desk, the staff member checked the list once, twice, 3 times. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said with an uncomfortable smile. "But your name isn't here. There must be a mistake." I insisted, my voice shaking. "I'm Derek's mother." That's when I saw him approaching, looking elegant and confident. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked. But his tone wasn't surprised, it was annoyed. Irritated. Like I was a door-to-door salesperson who wouldn't take the hint. "Derek, son, I came to your wedding. My name isn't on the list, but it must be a mistake." He looked at me with a coldness I'd never seen before. "It's not a mistake, Mom. I told you this was for close family only." "But I am your family," I pleaded, hating how desperate I sounded. "I am your mother." Derek sighed and actually rolled his eyes. "Did you really think you were going to be invited after everything you've done?" "Everything I'd done." "Derek, I gave you everything. Everything I had." "Exactly," he said with pure contempt. "Always giving, always smothering, always meddling in my life. Vanessa is right. You never knew your place." At that moment, Vanessa appeared in her wedding dress, looking like a princess from a magazine. When she saw me, her smile turned to ice. "What is she doing here?" she asked Derek, as if I were invisible. "She's just leaving," he replied without looking at me. "Right, Mom?" I could have broken down. I could have begged. I could have made a scene that would have ruined their precious perfect day. But instead, I smiled. A calm, serene smile that seemed to unsettle them both. "I understand perfectly," I told them. "Have a beautiful wedding," and I walked away. But as I headed toward the exit, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd been hesitating to call for weeks. "Samuel," I said when my lawyer answered. "I think it's time to execute the plan we discussed." Samuel had been my attorney for over 20 years. He was the only person who knew all my secrets. "Are you sure, Margaret?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Once we do this, there's no going back." "Completely sure?" I replied as I slid into the taxi. Derek just showed me exactly what I'm worth to him. It's time he learns what he's really going to lose. As the taxi pulled away from the venue, my phone started vibrating with messages. But they weren't from Derek asking where I was or apologizing. They were from Vanessa, absolutely furious that I dared to show up. "How dare you come without an invitation? You have no dignity." One message read, "Derek is upset with you. I hope you're happy for ruining our special day," said another. Ruining their special day. This woman genuinely believed that my 5-minute presence had destroyed anything. She had absolutely no idea what it really meant to ruin something. But she was about to learn. I arrived home, and for the first time in months, I felt strangely calm. For years, I'd been walking on eggshells, trying not to bother Derek, not to inconvenience Vanessa, to be the perfect mother who doesn't interfere, but is always available when needed. But that night, as I took off the dress I'd bought for a wedding I wasn't invited to, I made the most important decision of my life. I was retiring. Not from work. I was retiring from being a mother. Derek never knew the truth about my financial situation. When I adopted him, I was a young woman working as a secretary, living in a cramped studio apartment. He grew up watching my struggles, my multiple part-time jobs, my constant hustle to make ends meet. What I never told him was that my father, who had moved to Europe in the 1950s, had been brilliantly investing his money from his import-export business for decades. When my father died 10 years ago, he left me a substantial inheritance. Properties in Geneva, stocks in thriving companies, bank accounts Derek could never have imagined existed. But I decided to keep living as I always had. Working, saving, staying in the same modest house. I wanted Derek to value me for who I was, not for what I had. What a catastrophic mistake that turned out to be. That very night, while Derek and Vanessa were celebrating their wedding, I was on my computer transferring money, making calls, setting everything in motion. The next day, when they woke up from their abbreviated honeymoon, their entire world had begun to shift. At first, the changes were subtle. Derek called me 3 days after the wedding, not to apologize, but to ask me to look after his apartment while he and Vanessa were in Cancun. "Mom, I need you to water the plants and pick up the mail," he said casually, "and Vanessa wants you to clean up a bit because we're having people over when we get back." "I can't," I replied simply. "What do you mean you can't?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "I'm busy. Find someone else." And I hung up. An hour later, Vanessa was screaming at me over the phone. "What's wrong with you, Margaret? Are you insane? It's the least you can do after the scene you made at our wedding." "I didn't make a scene," I responded calmly. "I just came to congratulate my son." "Your son doesn't want you there," she yelled. "Get it through your head. You are a burden to him. a burden. After everything I'd sacrificed, every dream I'd abandoned, every dollar I'd stretched impossibly thin, I was a burden. You're right, Vanessa, I told her. I am a burden. That's why I've decided to free him from that burden forever. What do you mean by that? She asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. I mean, I'm retiring. Derek no longer has a mother. I hung up and turned off my phone. It was time to start my new life. The next day, I hired movers and packed my most important belongings. Everything else I donated to charity. I sold my modest house in the neighborhood where I'd raised Derek and moved into a 5-star hotel in the city center. Not because I couldn't afford another house, but because I wanted time to decide exactly what I was going to do with the rest of my life. Samuel visited me at the hotel that first week. Margaret, are you absolutely certain you want to do this? He asked, reviewing the papers I'd given him. I've been certain since the moment Derek looked at me with contempt at that venue entrance. I replied. That boy thinks I'm a poor, pathetic old woman who depends on him. It's time he knows the truth. The papers Samuel held were property transfer documents, bank statements, and something Derek had never seen: the deed to the house he lived in. The house he thought he'd bought with his mortgage was actually purchased by me. I'd paid the down payment. I'd signed the loan. I'd been silently paying the mortgage for years so he could maintain his lifestyle. But that wasn't all. The company where Derek worked as an engineer also had a secret. The owner, Mr. Harrison, was a business partner of my father's from Europe. When Derek graduated, I'd spoken to Mr. Harrison about giving my son an opportunity. Not only did he hire him, but for years, he'd been sending me performance reports. Derek was a mediocre employee who'd kept his job more because of my influence than his talent. Vanessa also had no idea who she'd really married. Her brand new husband, the successful engineer she bragged about constantly, was actually the adopted son of a woman who could buy and sell her entire family without blinking. While they enjoyed their honeymoon spending wedding gift money from Vanessa's family, I was at the hotel spa, relaxing for the first time in decades. It had been years since I'd allowed myself this kind of luxury. I'd always been too busy working for Derek, worrying about Derek, living for Derek. I'd forgotten to live for myself. It was during a massage that I made my next decision. I wasn't just going to retire from being a mother. I was going to make absolutely sure that Derek and Vanessa understood exactly what they'd lost. When Derek and Vanessa returned from their honeymoon, the problems began immediately. First, the utility company cut off their electricity for non-payment. Derek called me furious. Mom, why didn't you pay the electricity bill for my house? Because it's not my house? I replied calmly. And because I'm no longer your mom. What are you talking about? Of course you're my mom. No, I said. Mothers are invited to their sons' weddings. I was not invited. Therefore, I am not your mother. Derek fell silent. Mom, don't be ridiculous. It was just a wedding. Exactly? I replied. Just a wedding. The most important day of your life, and you decided I had no place in it. Now you live with the consequences of that decision. But you've always paid my utilities, he shouted. It's your obligation. My obligation? I felt anger rise in my chest. Derek, for 28 years I fulfilled obligations that weren't mine. That's over. I hung up and immediately dialed Mr. Harrison's number. Good morning, Mr. Harrison. It's Margaret. I think it's time we talked about Derek. Ah, Margaret? Mr. Harrison sighed. I figured you'd be calling soon. I heard about what happened at the wedding. That boy has no idea what you've done for him all these years. That's exactly why I'm calling, I said. I want you to evaluate Derek as he truly is as an employee, without my influence. Mr. Harrison was quiet for a moment. Margaret, if I withdraw my protection, Derek is going to have serious problems in the company. His work is mediocre at best. He's constantly late, and several clients have specifically complained about his attitude. Then handle the situation as it should be handled. I replied firmly. I will no longer intercede for him. Meanwhile, Vanessa had begun noticing other changes. The credit card she used for her endless shopping sprees had been canceled. It was a card I'd taken out years ago and had been paying silently so Derek could keep his girlfriend, and later wife, happy. When Vanessa tried to use it at her favorite boutique, the saleswoman informed her the card had been canceled for non-payment. Derek. Vanessa screamed that night. Your mother canceled my credit card! Call her right now and tell her to reactivate it! Derek called me in a rage. Mom, how can you be so petty? Vanessa needs that card. Vanessa can get her own card, I replied. Or you can get one for her with your credit. Oh, wait. You don't have any credit because you've never actually paid for anything yourself. You're a bitter old woman, he yelled at me. That's why nobody loves you? His words stung. But this time, I didn't stay silent. Derek? I said in a firm voice. For 28 years, I swallowed my pride so you could have everything you wanted. I humbled myself. I worked to exhaustion. I gave up my own happiness. And when the most important moment of your life came, you treated me like garbage. Now you're gonna learn what it means to stand on your own 2 feet. I hung up and turned off my phone. It was time for the next step. The next day, I visited Derek at his office. I arrived in a luxury car service, dressed in an elegant suit I'd purchased that morning. When I entered the building, everyone stared. Derek came out of his cubicle looking shocked. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I came to talk to you," I said. "Can we speak privately?" We went to a conference room and I closed the door. "Derek," I said, "I want you to know something. For all these years, Mr. Thing, Harrison has been very patient with you because he respects me. But that patience has run out." "What are you talking about?" he asked nervously. "I'm talking about the fact that Mr. Harrison knows you're constantly late, that your work is mediocre, that several clients have complained about you. The only thing that's kept you in this job has been my influence." Derek turned pale. "That's not true." I took out my phone and called Mr. Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, could you please come to the conference room? My son has some questions about his job performance." 5 minutes later, Mr. Harrison entered with a folder in his hands. "Good morning, Derek," he said seriously. "Your mother asked me to show you this." He opened the folder and removed several documents. "These are your supervisor's reports for the last 3 years. According to these records, you've been late 43 times. You've submitted projects with significant errors, and 3 major clients specifically requested that you not work on their accounts again." Derek stared at the papers in disbelief. But they never said anything to me. "Because your mother asked me to be patient with you," Mr. Harrison continued. "She's been quietly paying for your mistakes, apologizing to clients, even financially compensating the company for losses you've caused." "That's a lie," Derek whispered. "It's not a lie," I told him. "For years, I've been cleaning up your messes because I thought one day you'd become the man I hoped you'd be. But I was wrong. You're already the man you were going to be. Someone who treats his mother like trash." Mr. Harrison closed the folder. "Derek, as a personal favor to your mother, I'm giving you 2 weeks to find another job. After that, your employment here is terminated." He stood and left, leaving us alone. Derek looked at me with desperate eyes. "Mom, please. You can't do this. Vanessa is going to kill me if I lose my job. You should have thought of that before you kicked me out of your wedding," I replied. "Now you're going to learn what it means to lose what you value most." I stood to leave, but Derek grabbed my arm. "Wait! You can't do this! I'm your son!" "No," I said, pulling my arm away. "My son would have defended his mother when his wife insulted her. My son would have invited me to his wedding. My son would have treated me with respect. You are not my son, Derek. You're a stranger living in a house I paid for, with a job I secured for him, married to a woman who despises him as much as he despises me." I walked out of that office, and for the first time in years, I felt completely free. That night, Derek arrived home completely shattered. Vanessa was waiting with a glass of wine, ready to hear about his day. But when she saw his face, she knew something was terribly wrong. "What happened?" she asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," Derek replied, collapsing on the couch. "I saw my mother turn into my worst nightmare." He told her everything: the performance reports, the threat of being fired, the revelation that Margaret had been covering for him for years. Vanessa listened with growing horror. "Are you telling me your mother has been controlling your job this whole time?" "It wasn't control," Derek mumbled. "It was protection." "It was manipulation!" Vanessa shouted. "That woman is a psychopath! First she ruins our wedding, and now she wants to ruin your career." But for the first time, Derek wasn't sure his mother was the villain. His entire life, Margaret had been there, solving his problems, paying his bills, opening doors he'd thought he'd opened himself, and he'd kicked her out of his wedding like she was an intruder. "Vanessa," he said slowly, "maybe we should apologize to her?" "Apologize?" Vanessa jumped to her feet. "Derek, that woman is blackmailing you! She's manipulating you to make you feel guilty!" "It's not blackmail," Derek replied. "It's consequences. I told her she didn't fit our image, and now she's showing us that we're the ones who don't fit in hers." Vanessa couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I can't believe you're defending her after what she did today." "What she did?" Derek looked at her with exhausted eyes. "Vanessa, what she did was open my eyes. For years, I've been living a lie, believing I was successful on my own merit when in reality, I was successful because of her sacrifice." That conversation marked the beginning of the end. Vanessa couldn't accept that her successful husband was actually a mediocre man propped up by his mother-in-law. She'd spent months bragging about Derek's job, his abilities, his bright future. What was she supposed to tell her friends now? Meanwhile, I was in my hotel suite having room service for dinner and watching the news. My phone had been ringing all afternoon, but I kept it on silent. I knew it was Derek and Vanessa. Probably desperate, probably furious, probably begging. But I'd learned something crucial: when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. The next morning, Samuel came to visit with more papers. "Margaret," he said, "I have the transfers ready. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this?" In my hands, I held documents to transfer ownership of Derek's house to my name, cancel all automatic payments I'd been making, and withdraw my signature from all his loans. "Completely certain," I replied. "That boy wants independence. Well, he's going to get complete independence." I signed everything and Samuel left to process the transfers. In 24 hours, Derek would discover that the house he lived in was no longer his, that his credit cards were canceled, and that he had to start paying rent he couldn't afford with a job he was about to lose. But I had a bigger plan. It wasn't enough for Derek to learn his lesson. I also wanted Vanessa to understand who she'd messed with. That woman had spent months insulting me, looking down on me, treating me like a bothersome, worthless old woman. It was time for her to learn my real value. That afternoon, I dressed in my best suit and took a taxi to the boutique where Vanessa worked as a sales associate. It was an expensive store in the most exclusive mall in the city. The kind of place where she felt important because she served wealthy women. What Vanessa didn't know was that I was wealthier than most of her clients. I entered the store like any other customer and started browsing the clothes. Vanessa was helping another woman, but when she saw me, her expression changed completely. "What are you doing here?" she asked in a hostile voice. "I came to buy clothes," I answered calmly. "Isn't that your job? To help customers?" The other customer looked between us, confused by Vanessa's aggressive tone. "Do you know this lady?" "She's my mother-in-law," Vanessa replied with contempt. "Someone who doesn't know her place." "Oh," I said, smiling. "Then I do know my place. My place is that of a woman with money who wants to spend it. Are you going to help me, or do I need to speak with your manager?" Vanessa turned red with rage, but she couldn't make a scene in front of other customers. "What do you want?" she asked through gritted teeth. "I want to see that dress in the window," I said, pointing to the most expensive one in the store. "The $6,000 one." Vanessa's eyes widened. $6,000? Are you deaf? "Yes, $6,000. Do you think I can't afford it?" Vanessa went to get the dress, muttering insults under her breath. When she returned, she showed it to me with barely concealed annoyance. "Here it is," she said, "but I doubt you can afford it." I took out my platinum credit card and handed it to her. "Charge it," I said. "And while you process the payment, I want you to know something." Vanessa took the card and walked to the register. When she swiped it, the system not only approved the purchase, but also displayed a credit limit that left her speechless. "How?" she started to say. "How can a poor old woman like me have a card like this?" I finished her sentence. "Very easily, Vanessa. It turns out I'm not poor. I never was." I took out my phone and showed her my banking app. Vanessa looked at the numbers and turned pale. "This can't be real," she whispered. "See that number?" I asked, pointing to my bank balance. "That's just one of my accounts. I have properties in Geneva, stocks in several companies, and more money than you'll ever earn in your entire life working in this store." Vanessa handed back the card with trembling hands. "Why did you never say anything?" "Because I wanted Derek to value me for who I am, not for what I have," I replied. "But you both showed me that to you. I'm worth nothing. So I decided to show you what you're really losing." I took my bag with the dress and headed for the exit. But before leaving, I turned back. "Oh, and one more thing. Derek is going to lose his job next week, and the house you live in is no longer yours. So I hope you have some savings because you're going to need them." I left the store, leaving Vanessa paralyzed behind the counter. That night, Vanessa came home trembling with rage and confusion. Derek was in the living room drinking a beer, trying to forget his horrible day. "Derek!" Vanessa shouted from the doorway. "Your mother was at my work today." Derek turned off the television. "What? Why?" "To humiliate me," Vanessa replied, throwing her purse on the floor. "She bought a $6,000 dress just to prove she has money?" Derek frowned. $6,000. "Vanessa, my mom is a retired secretary. She doesn't have that kind of money to spend on a dress." "That's what we thought," Vanessa shouted. "But she showed me her bank account, Derek. She has millions." "Millions." Derek fell silent, processing this information. "That's impossible," he murmured. "I know my mother's financial situation. She's always been middle class." "She lied to you?" Vanessa started pacing. For years, she made you believe she was poor to manipulate you. She's a sociopath? But Derek was remembering things he'd never questioned. His mother had always had exactly the right amount of money for his emergencies. When he had appendicitis in college, she appeared with money for private surgery. When he wanted to buy his car, she had the down payment. When he needed a suit for graduation, she bought it without hesitation. Vanessa, he said slowly. I don't think my mother ever lied to us about her money. We simply never asked. What do you mean we never asked? Vanessa looked at him like he was insane. Derek, you lived with that woman your whole life? Exactly? Derek replied. I lived with her my whole life, and I was never really interested in knowing her. I never asked about her family, her past, her finances. I just assumed she existed to serve me. That revelation hit them both like cold water. Vanessa realized she'd married a man who didn't truly know his own mother. Derek realized he despised a woman who'd kept important secrets for decades. The next day, Derek decided to find his mother at the hotel. When he arrived at reception and asked for Margaret, the concierge looked him up and down with contempt. Are you a relative of the lady? He asked. I'm her son, Derek replied. Ah, the concierge said with a cold smile. The son who didn't invite her to his wedding. The lady mentioned you. Derek turned red with embarrassment. Can I speak with her? The lady left specific instructions that she doesn't want to receive visits from family. The concierge informed him. But I can deliver a message if you like. Derek wrote a quick note apologizing and begging for a chance to talk. The concierge took it and disappeared into the elevator. 5 minutes later, he returned with the same note. The lady says you already had your chance to talk to her, and you wasted it at the wedding venue entrance. There will not be a second chance. Derek left the hotel feeling more lost than ever. Meanwhile, I was in my suite talking on the phone with Mr. Harrison. How has Derek been at work? I asked. Margaret, Mr. Harrison sighed. The boy is a wreck. He's late constantly, makes endless mistakes, and yesterday a client complained because Derek broke down crying during a presentation. Crying? I asked, surprised. Yes, Mr. Harrison confirmed. They asked him something about project costs, and he started crying, saying he didn't know anything anymore, that his whole life had been a lie. For a moment, I felt a small pang in my chest. Despite everything, Derek was still the boy I'd raised, the one who'd cried when hurt and come running to my arms. But then I remembered his contemptuous face when he kicked me out of his wedding, and the pain turned to determination. Mr. Harrison, I said, stick to your decision. Derek needs to learn that actions have consequences. That same week, Derek and Vanessa received legal notice about the house. A lawyer arrived at their door with papers proving the property had been fully transferred to my name, and that they had 30 days to vacate or start paying monthly rent of $3,000. Vanessa read the documents and became hysterical. This is impossible! The house is ours! We have the deed! Apparently not, Derek told her in a hollow voice. Apparently my mother has been paying for this house for years, and I never knew. Vanessa started screaming that he was useless, that she'd married a failure. Her screams became so intense that neighbors called the police for a domestic disturbance. When officers arrived, they found Vanessa breaking plates and furniture, while Derek huddled in a corner crying. Mom. One officer said to Vanessa, you need to calm down or we're gonna have to arrest you for disturbing the peace. You can't arrest me, Vanessa screamed. This is my house. According to these documents, the officer said, reviewing the legal papers, this house belongs to a lady named Margaret. Are you Margaret? She's my mother-in-law. Then this is not your house, the officer concluded. I suggest you resolve this matter civilly, or we'll be forced to intervene. After the police left, Derek and Vanessa sat among broken plates and overturned furniture. What are we going to do? Vanessa whispered. I don't know. Derek replied. I don't have a job, I don't have a house. I don't have savings because I always thought my mother would bail me out. I hate that woman. Vanessa screamed. I hate her. She ruined our lives. No, Derek said in a broken voice. We ruined our lives when we decided she didn't deserve our respect. It was the first time Derek had admitted they were wrong. But Vanessa wasn't ready to accept responsibility. In her mind, I was the villain who destroyed her perfect marriage. What she didn't know was that her marriage had never been perfect. It had been an illusion built on my silent sacrifices. That night, Vanessa made a decision that would change everything. If she couldn't get Derek to win back his mother, then she'd make his mother pay publicly for what she'd done to them. She opened her social media account and began writing a post that would go viral for all the wrong reasons. My psycho mother-in-law kicked us out of our house after ruining our wedding, the post began. For years, She pretended to be poor to manipulate my husband. But in reality, she's a millionaire. Now that we're married, she decided to destroy our lives out of jealousy. My husband lost his job because of her, and now we have nowhere to live. This sick woman can't accept that her son doesn't need her anymore. The post was accompanied by photos of Vanessa crying, and of their trashed house after her tantrum. Within hours, it had thousands of shares and comments. People were outraged by the evil mother-in-law who'd abandoned her son after his wedding. Vanessa had presented herself as the perfect victim. A beautiful young bride destroyed by a jealous, vengeful older woman. The comments filled with insults directed at me and words of support for Vanessa. What a horrible mother-in-law. One person wrote, she should be ashamed for treating her own son like that. Another commented. Vanessa read every comment with satisfaction, feeling vindicated by the support of strangers. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted, to make me the public villain of her story. But Vanessa made a fatal mistake. In her thirst for revenge, she'd tagged my full name in the post, thinking I'd be ashamed seeing all the insults. What she didn't know was that by tagging my name, she'd caused several people who actually knew me to see the post. The first to contact me was an old colleague. Margaret. She wrote in a private message, "Have you seen what your daughter-in-law is saying on social media? She's completely lying about you." I opened social media for the first time in weeks and read Vanessa's post. Every word was a distortion of reality. Every accusation was an inversion of the facts. I sat in my hotel suite reading hundreds of comments from people insulting me without knowing the truth. Toxic mother-in-law, bitter woman, psychopath, abusive. Each word stung, but curiously they didn't hurt as much as I expected. After everything I'd been through with Derek and Vanessa, insults from strangers seemed insignificant. But what did bother me was that Vanessa had gotten exactly what she wanted. To turn me into the monster of her story. She'd taken my pain, my disappointment, my decision to protect myself, and transformed it into a narrative where she was the innocent victim and I was the cruel villain. That's when I decided it was time to tell my own side of the story. That night, I opened my own social media account and started writing. Not a post full of rage or revenge, but a calm, honest account of what had really happened. My name is Margaret, and I am the psycho mother-in-law you've been talking about, I began. I want to tell you the truth about what really happened. I wrote about adopting Derek, about years of sacrifice, about how I'd worked multiple jobs to give him the best education. I explained how I'd been quietly paying his expenses for years, from his house to his credit cards, from his job to his medical emergencies. I described Vanessa's constant humiliations, Derek's growing contempt, and finally the exclusion from his wedding. I did not kick them out of the house. I wrote, I am charging them rent for a house that I bought and paid for. I did not make Derek lose his job. I simply stopped covering for his poor performance. I did not pretend to be poor to manipulate them. I kept my private life private because I wanted them to value me for who I am, not for what I have. But the most powerful part of my post was when I shared the recordings. Over the past months, I'd started recording conversations with Vanessa and Derek. Not out of malice, but for protection. When someone constantly lies about what you said or did, recordings become your only defense. I'd recorded Vanessa insulting me. I'd recorded Derek telling me I didn't fit their image. I'd recorded the phone call where Vanessa screamed that I was a burden. I uploaded snippets of those recordings along with my post. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Within minutes, the comments began to change. "Oh my God, that daughter-in-law is horrible," someone wrote. "How can a son treat his mother like that?" Another commented. But I wasn't finished. Over the next few days, I posted more evidence. Photos of receipts for everything I'd paid for Derek over the years. Copies of bank statements showing constant money transfers. Documents proving I'd signed all his loans. Screenshots of messages where Vanessa insulted me. With each post, the narrative shifted more. People began sharing my posts with comments like, "This is what happens when you don't value your mother," and "What an important lesson about consequences." But the post that really changed everything was when I told the full story of Derek's adoption 28 years ago. I adopted a 3-year-old boy who had been abandoned by his biological mother. I wrote, he was a sad, scared child who needed love. I gave him that love unconditionally for decades. But unconditional love does not mean allowing yourself to be treated without respect. Sometimes the most important lesson you can teach someone is that actions have consequences. That post went viral on its own. Thousands of people shared it, commented on it, saved it. Mothers all over the world identified with my story. Adult children began reflecting on how they treated their own mothers. The entire conversation had shifted. Vanessa watched her narrative crumble in real time. Comments on her original post were now filled with people criticizing her for lying and manipulating the story. How could you lie like that about a woman who sacrificed everything for you? They wrote. You should be ashamed, others told her. Desperate, Vanessa did a live stream to defend herself from my attacks. But it was the worst mistake she could have made. Vanessa started her live stream with tears in her eyes and a trembling voice. Hello, everyone, she said. I know many of you have seen my mother-in-law's posts, and I want to clear things up. That woman is lying about everything. There were only about 50 people watching at first, but the number grew rapidly as people shared the link. Margaret is not the victim she pretends to be. Vanessa continued. She is a manipulative, controlling woman who ruined our marriage because she can't accept that Derek doesn't need her anymore. The live comments started pouring in, but they weren't what Vanessa expected. Where's the proof of what you're saying? Someone wrote. Margaret's recordings sound very clear. Another commented. Why don't you show evidence like she did? Vanessa got nervous seeing the comments weren't supporting her. She manipulated those recordings, Vanessa shouted. She edited them to make me look bad. But as she was saying this, I was watching her broadcast from my hotel suite and decided it was time to make my appearance. I started my own live stream and wrote in Vanessa's comments, Hello, Vanessa. It's Margaret. Do you mind if I join the conversation? The comments exploded. She's here. This is gonna be good. Well, finally hear both sides? Vanessa turned pale when she saw my comment. No, she said with a trembling voice. I'm not going to give her a platform to continue lying about me. But the comments were now demanding I be allowed to speak. Coward. They wrote, if you're telling the truth, you shouldn't be afraid. Let her speak. Fine, Vanessa finally said. Let her join. That way everyone can see what kind of person she really is. I accepted her invitation and appeared on screen next to her. The contrast was stark. I was calm, well-dressed, in an elegant suit. Vanessa looked disheveled and desperate in a messy house. Hello, Vanessa, I said in a serene voice. Thank you for allowing me to clear things up. Go ahead, she responded, hostilely. Lee all you want? People already know the truth about you. The truth, I said, is that you have been insulting me for months, and I have recordings to prove it. Would you like me to play them here live for everyone to hear? Vanessa turned red. Those recordings are illegal. No, I replied calmly. In this country, it is legal to record conversations when you are a participant, especially when you feel you're being harassed or threatened. The comments filled with people asking me to play the recordings. Play them. We want to hear. The truth comes to light. I played the audio where Vanessa screamed that I was a burden to Derek, where she told me I had no dignity, where she insulted me for showing up at her wedding. The audio was clear and devastating. Vanessa's voice filled with hatred and contempt, saying things no daughter-in-law should ever say. When the recording finished, Vanessa was crying. That was out of context. She whispered. Out of context? I asked. In what context is it okay to tell a 71-year-old woman that she is a burden and has no dignity? You provoked us? Vanessa yelled. You were always meddling in our marriage. Vanessa, I said, maintaining my calm. Can you give me one specific example of how I meddled in your marriage? Vanessa opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She realized she couldn't give an example because one didn't exist. The only times I interacted with you, I continued, was when Derek asked me for help or when you invited me to dinner. I never showed up uninvited. I never gave unsolicited advice. I never criticized your relationship. My only mistake was existing. The comments were now completely on my side. Vanessa looks like a liar. This lady is so dignified. How could they treat their mother like that? The viewer count had reached over 10,000 people. But you blackmailed us, Vanessa said desperately. You took away our house and Derek's job to force us to apologize? Vanessa, I replied, I didn't take anything from you. I simply stopped paying for you. The house was mine from the beginning. Derek's job was secured through my influence. The credit cards were paid by me. You never had anything of your own? I took out documents and showed them to the camera. These are the original deeds to the house, I said. As you can see, it was always in my name. These are bank statements showing I've been paying the mortgage for 5 years. These are receipts for all the credit cards I've paid for Derek. Vanessa had no more arguments. But we were family, she said in a broken voice. Family? I repeated. Families invite each other to weddings, Vanessa. Families treat each other with respect. You showed me that to you. I was not family. I was an unpaid employee. Derek? I said, addressing the camera because I knew he'd be watching. For 28 years, I was your mother. I changed your diapers when you were a baby. I took you to the doctor when you were sick. I worked extra hours to pay for your college. I defended you when you got in trouble, but when the time came for you to defend me, you chose to humiliate me. That choice has consequences. Vanessa tried to interrupt, but I cut her off. I'm not finished. Vanessa, you chose to see me as a threat instead of an ally. You chose to insult me instead of respecting me. You chose to lie about me on social media instead of accepting responsibility for your actions. Now you will live with the consequences of those choices. The comments exploded with support for me. What a strong woman! Vanessa should be ashamed. Poetic justice? The viewer count had reached 15,000 and was still growing. Do you know what the saddest part of all this is? I asked Vanessa. I really wanted to love you. When Derek told me he had a girlfriend, I was thrilled. I thought I was finally going to have a daughter. I prepared special dinners for you. I bought you gifts. I tried to include you in all our family traditions, but you chose to see me as your enemy from day one. Vanessa was crying openly now. I didn't know. Of course you knew, I replied. You knew exactly what you were doing, and now everyone else knows too. I ended the broadcast, leaving Vanessa crying alone on screen. Within minutes, clips of our conversation were circulating everywhere. I had publicly destroyed her, not with lies or manipulation, but simply by telling the truth. The live stream went viral within hours. Shocking clips were shared millions of times with titles like, Mother, In-Law Destroys Lying Daughter, In-Law with Facts, and The Most Elegant Revenge in History. Vanessa had been completely exposed as a manipulative liar, while I had emerged as a dignified woman who had simply defended herself with the truth. The consequences for Vanessa and Derek were immediate and devastating. The boutique where Vanessa worked fired her the next day. We can't have employees who generate this kind of controversy, her manager explained. Our clientele are elegant ladies who now see you as a contentious person. Vanessa tried to explain it had all been a misunderstanding, but it was too late. The video of her insulting me had been seen by millions, including the store's wealthy clients. Derek, meanwhile, arrived at work to find a termination letter on his desk. Mr. Harrison had given him a 2-week grace period, but after the public exposure, he couldn't keep him on even out of respect for me. Derek, Mr. Harrison told him when they met in his office. After what happened last night, several clients have called to say they don't want to work with someone who treats his mother that way. I'm sorry, but your employment here ends today. But social media wasn't done with them. Users began investigating their lives, discovering inconsistencies in Vanessa's stories. Someone found old posts where Vanessa bragged about expensive gifts Derek gave her. Gifts they now knew I had paid for. Others discovered the couple had been living a lifestyle far beyond their actual means. The hashtag #FiTeamMargaret started trending worldwide. Women of all ages shared their own stories about ungrateful children or problematic daughters-in-law. Mothers who'd been excluded from weddings. Mothers-in-law who'd been treated with contempt. Women who'd sacrificed everything for their families, only to be abandoned when no longer useful. My story had struck a very sensitive chord with millions of people. Meanwhile, I was in my hotel suite watching everything unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I'd gotten justice. I'd cleared my name. I'd made my point. But I'd also lost my son forever. The relationship between Derek and me was broken in a way that could probably never be repaired. Samuel came to visit that afternoon with more legal papers. Margaret, he said, Derek and Vanessa have been trying to contact me. They want to negotiate. Negotiate what? I asked. They want you to give them back the house and drop the defamation claims. In return, they promise to apologize publicly and stay out of your life forever. I laughed bitterly. They want to negotiate now. After calling me a psychopath and a liar in front of millions. They're desperate, Samuel explained. They have no job, no house, no money. Vanessa is receiving death threats on social media, and Derek is having panic attacks. Panic attacks? I asked, feeling a pang of concern despite everything. Yes, Samuel confirmed. Apparently he can't leave the house without people recognizing and confronting him. Yesterday, an elderly lady slapped him in the supermarket, shouting that he was a disgrace as a son. For a moment, I felt something like compassion. After all, Derek was still the boy I'd raised, the one I'd comforted during nightmares, and celebrated his first steps. But then I remembered his disgusted face when he kicked me out of his wedding, and the compassion vanished. Consequences? I murmured. They chose this path. What do you want me to tell them? Samuel asked. Tell them the house is mine and will remain mine. If they want to continue living there, they can pay the full rent of $3,000 a month. If they can't afford it, they have to move out. As for the defamation lawsuits, Those will proceed until I receive a full public apology and compensation for damage to my reputation." Samuel left, and I was alone with my thoughts. The truth was, I no longer needed the rent money or legal compensation. I had more money than I could spend in several lifetimes, but I needed Derek and Vanessa to understand that actions have a price, that you can't treat people like trash and expect no consequences. That night, Derek finally got through to me. He'd gotten my hotel number and called repeatedly until I agreed to answer. "Mom," he said in a broken voice, "please, we have to talk." "We already talked," I replied. "At the door of the wedding venue. You told me I didn't fit your image." "Mom, please." I was confused. Vanessa had filled my head with crazy ideas. "Derek," I interrupted. "Vanessa didn't put a gun to your head to make you kick me out of your wedding. That decision was yours. Vanessa didn't force you to treat me with contempt for months. Those were your decisions. But I didn't know you had money," he said desperately. "If I had known, I would never have treated you like that." Those words were like a knife to the heart. "Do you hear what you're saying, Derek? You're telling me you would have treated me better if you'd known I had money. What about treating me well because I'm your mother? What about respecting me because I sacrificed my life for you?" Derek fell silent, finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd revealed. I didn't mean that." "Yes, you did," I replied. "And that is exactly why our relationship is over. Because for you, my value as a person was determined by what I could do for you, not by who I am." "What do I have to do for you to forgive me?" he asked, crying. "Nothing," I answered sadly. "There is nothing you can do, Derek. Forgiveness is given to people who make mistakes, not to those who reveal their true character. You showed me who you really are when you thought it was safe to despise me. Now you have to live with being that person." I hung up, and for the first time since this whole situation began, I cried. Not for the loss of money or the house or status, but for the loss of the son I thought I'd raised. A son who had never really existed. 6 months later, my life had completely changed. I'd moved into a beautiful apartment in Geneva near the properties I'd inherited from my father. Europe welcomed me with open arms. A continent where no one knew my viral story, where I could walk the streets without being recognized, where I could start over at 71. Samuel managed my legal affairs from the States. Derek and Vanessa had finally lost the house, unable to pay the $3,000 rent. They'd moved into a small apartment in a modest neighborhood, a far cry from the life of fake luxury they'd been living. Derek had found a job as a technician in a small company, earning a fraction of what he used to. Vanessa was working in a call center, the only place that would hire her after her reputation was destroyed. The defamation lawsuit had succeeded. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering Vanessa to pay considerable compensation and issue a formal public apology. The apology had been brief and clearly forced, but legally sufficient. I apologized to Margaret for the false statements I made about her on social media. I acknowledged that my claims were incorrect and caused damage to her reputation. I deeply regret my behavior. I donated the compensation money entirely to organizations that helped single mothers and adoptive families. I didn't need their money, but they needed to learn that lying publicly about someone has a real cost. During these months, I'd received thousands of messages from women all over the world. Mothers who'd been inspired by my story to set boundaries with abusive children. Mothers-in-law who'd found courage to stand up to disrespectful daughters-in-law. Older women who decided to stop living for others and start living for themselves. One letter that touched me most was from a woman named Maria from Colombia. "Mrs. Margaret," she wrote, "your story saved my life. For 15 years, I swallowed the contempt of my son and daughter-in-law, believing it was my duty as a mother to endure everything for love. After seeing your story, I realized that love does not mean allowing abuse. Thank you for teaching me that mothers deserve respect too." I'd started writing a book about my experience. Not for revenge or to make more money, but because I realized my story had touched something universal. Millions of women had seen themselves reflected in my experiences, and I thought maybe my full story could help others recognize and escape toxic relationships. The book would be called "I Retired from Motherhood," and it would be dedicated to all the women who'd sacrificed their identity for love, and who needed to remember they deserved to be treated with dignity. Derek had tried to contact me several times during these months. Letters sent through Samuel, messages through mutual acquaintances. He'd even traveled to Geneva once to look for me. But I'd remained firm in my decision. I'd closed that door forever. The last letter I received from him had been particularly painful. "Mom," he wrote, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I realize everything I did wrong. Vanessa and I divorced. She could never get over the public humiliation and ended up blaming me for everything. Now I'm alone, and I understand what I lost. I didn't just lose a mother. I lost the only person who truly loved me unconditionally. I know it's too late, but I wanted you to know that I regret every cruel word, every moment of contempt, kicking you out of my wedding. I'm not asking you to forgive me, just for you to know that I understand you were the best mother anyone could have, and I was too stupid to value you. I read that letter several times, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because it was clear Derek had finally understood the magnitude of what he'd lost, but also relief because his understanding validated my decisions. I hadn't been cruel or vengeful. I'd simply defended my dignity and established appropriate consequences for abuse. In my new life in Geneva, I'd found a peace I hadn't felt in decades. I had time to read, to travel, to make new friends with people who valued me for who I was. I'd started taking painting classes. Something I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for because I was too busy living for Derek. I'd also started volunteering with an organization that helped older women who'd been abandoned by their families. My story gave them hope, showed them it was possible to rebuild a life after family rejection. That self-worth was more valuable than maintaining toxic relationships. One afternoon, while strolling through a park in Geneva, I reflected on the entire journey I'd taken. From adopting a 3-year-old boy to the decision to retire from motherhood at 71. It had been a long and painful journey, but also a liberating one. I didn't regret adopting Derek. I'd given him love, education, opportunities he wouldn't have had otherwise. I didn't regret the sacrifices I'd made during his childhood and adolescence, because those were acts of genuine love for a child who needed them. But I also didn't regret walking away when he became an adult who treated me with contempt. I'd learned a fundamental lesson. Unconditional love does not mean accepting unconditional abuse. There's a difference between loving someone and allowing them to destroy you in the name of that love. My phone vibrated with a message from Samuel. "Margaret," he wrote, "Derek contacted me again. He says he's in therapy and that he understands everything he did wrong. He's asking if there's any chance of reconciliation." I read the message and smiled sadly. I replied, "Tell him I'm glad to know he's working on himself, but some doors, once closed, do not reopen. I wish him the best in his new life." It was the truth. I wished Derek the best, but no longer from the position of his mother. That woman, the one who'd lived for him for decades, no longer existed. In her place, a new woman had been born, Margaret, a 71-year-old woman who'd learned it's never too late to choose dignity over convenience, self-respect over toxic love. As the sun set over Geneva, I thought of the phrase that had become my mantra. I don't regret adopting him. I only regret not understanding sooner that kindness should never be practiced at the cost of self-destruction. I had finished my career as a mother, but I had begun my life as a free woman. And that, I discovered, was the best revenge of all. To live well, to live in peace, to finally live for myself. I'm still processing everything that happened, even after all these months. Do you think I was too harsh? Or did Derek and Vanessa get exactly what they deserved? If you were in my position, could you ever forgive behavior like that? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what you all think about this whole situation.